Freestyle Travel. Hey everybody, this is the Freestyle Travel Show. I'm your host, Kenny Flannery, and I'm still alive. It's been a minute, guys. It's been a couple months or something. It's definitely the longest I've gone in the 4, 5, 6 years, however long it's been since I've had this podcast. This is the longest I've gone in between episodes, but I got some jam-packed storytelling for you. Primarily, I'm going to tell you about the 5, 6 weeks I spent filming my show Hopping, the backpacking beer adventure, and the amazing breweries that I went to, the good scenery, the unexpected drama. Might have lost a friend in this whole ordeal. I'm not really sure how it's going to shake out in the long term, but not looking super hot right now. Yeah, it's a lot more drama than normal. So you get that entertainment, the expense of my life. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you about the hopping stuff, a little bit leading up to that, and what's happened since. So, yeah, I might as well just lead you up to the hopping show, then we'll play that funky music and get right into it. So last I left you off, I was in Mississippi, in Biloxi, and I had been dog sitting for a friend of mine, a Christian, and hanging out there in Mississippi, doing my thing, getting ready for the show, getting geared up. Literally, got all the expensive new camera equipment, and was playing with that, getting used to it. And I thought, I might as well just hand deliver this to Nick, who was doing the show with me, being the camera guy I've known since 4th grade, friend of mine. And my buddy was going up to Maine, Christian, same dude, in Biloxi. So I was like, I'll just hitch a ride with him, cruise on up. So I did that. Had a hell of a time in Shreveport. He's got a new girlfriend, my buddy, so went and saw her there. Had a really good time in Shreveport. Haven't really partied there until now. And yeah, had a great time and just sort of inched our way up. We saw a friend in Tennessee and then stopped at the new girlfriend, her place, parents' place in Virginia, which is where I am now, actually, back at that place. I'll get into that. And yeah, got up to New York, met up with Nick, gave him the camera, the gimbal, all the accessories and stuff, showed him how to use it and whatnot. And sorry, the music's playing in my headphones. Let me just mute that. Yeah, showed Nick how to use all the stuff, had some beers with him, caught up, watched some movies, caught up with some other friends in New York, caught up with my brother. Had a pretty good time. And then, yeah, time was tight. So, seeing that I found a $40 flight to Denver, I just hopped on that, and that's where the show would begin. So, I hopped on this Frontier or Spirit, whatever cheapo airline it was. Got myself to Denver a day or two before Nick. I think I actually slept in the airport when I first got there. And the next day, I found someone on Trust Routes to stay with. And then I was just waiting on Nick. Not sure what the situation would be. He had told me he might be staying with some family friends or something, and I was just excited to see him. So let me, now play that funky music, and we'll get into the hopping backpacking beer adventure in all 5, 6 weeks, and all of its glory, ups and downs, and delicious beer and everything else. All right, let's get right into it. Hopping, the backpacking beer adventure. This is the show I came up with. Nick is a friend of mine since 4th grade, and he's been doing some location stuff in the film industry in New York for the last 10 years, so kind of in the film world, and thought about doing something with me, filming a documentary, following me on the road in some capacity, and finally he's like, I'm down to do it. So I'm like, let's get beer involved, have an angle for the show. So some of you may know or may have watched on YouTube the 8 episodes that came from the 3 weeks of filming we did at the end of 2019, the very first couple weeks of 2020. We went from Vegas through Arizona and California, went to a bunch of breweries, filmed the hitchhiking adventure, and a mutual friend edited it for free that time around. He's getting paid this time. And yeah, it turned out pretty good. It was supposed to be kind of an experiment, and we did a lot more than we thought we would. So, the whole COVID thing kind of put a damper on everybody's situations, and including ours. But finally, the window opened up, and we're like, all right, I think we're gonna film a second season of this. So, my idea was to kind of poetically start in one beer city, end in another, and Nick had more time this time. So I'm like, all right, let's do Denver to Portland and really just like also show off all the places in between your Montanas and Idahos and whatnot, places people don't necessarily think of when they think of craft beer, but these are places that are full of hidden gems, and we exposed a lot of them. So, yeah, like I said, I was in Denver. I'd stayed with a Trust Roots host, and Nick was finally flying on in. I went to a Great Divide Brewery just to meet him there. We weren't filming there, but it was like, just seemed like, let's meet at a brewery. So Nick showed up, camera out, ready to go. Had a beer, caught up. We did a little brewery hopping that night, and I hit up my host and asked if it was okay for Nick to stay with him too, because I thought Nick had plans to stay with someone else, but he uh, hadn't done that. So my host was more than happy to accommodate both of us, which was very cool. And we caught up with him for a beer, and then headed back to his place for the night. And in the morning, he dropped us off kind of close to brewery number one, which was Burns Family Ales. So we went to the park and did a bit of filming, bit of relaxing, and then walked on over to Burns Family Ales. And Burns Family Ales specializes in high ABV beers, typically 12% and higher. They had one little beer on tap. It was just an 8% little Belgian. I thought that was pretty cool. I like their style. Big imperial stouts, beer to guards, all kinds of just great, delicious, flavorful, high octane beers in their little tap room. And it was just a husband and wife at the moment, doing everything from brewing to marketing to bartending. Literally the whole shebang, just two people. That's it. I think they're finally going to hire another bartender soon, but had not done that yet. It was very cool. So we filmed there. We did our typical shtick, which is to walk around. Nick follows me with the camera as I chat with the brewer, in this case, the couple, both of them, and kind of check out their facility. And then we sort of regroup and set up at a table and pour a bunch of beers, a bunch of tasters, and then get a couple more cameras set up. So we have three cameras pointing at me and in this case, the two people. Usually it's just one. And yeah, I just taste as many beers as they'll pour for me, and we both talk about them, and I ask them more questions about the brewery and this and that. We finish that up, and then we film a bunch of B-roll. So Nick goes around with the good camera, getting close-ups of the fermenters and just the vibe of the place. And I pop the drone up in the air and make sure to get like slow motion beer pour, all the B-roll stuff. And usually we spend about an hour doing that, sometimes more, just sipping on beers while we're doing it. Nick usually waits to the end to grab a beer, and yeah, and that's what happened then. And then we went marching out into the sunset towards downtown Denver. My host at that point was leaving town, I guess, so we couldn't stay with him that night. So, not sure where we were going to stay. I decided to guide us to a brewery so we could kind of figure it out, as I often do. Uh, Sat down at the brewery, and I'm kind of looking at my phone satellite view of Denver, looking for places we can potentially stealth camp. Also seeing if there might be any other hosts in town, that kind of thing, and just leaving ourselves open to travel magic in general. You never know when you're going to be at a bar or something, and someone walks up and asks you about your backpack and what are you doing, and maybe they offer you a place to stay. That did not happen that particular night. Instead, while I was looking at my phone, looking for campsites, Nick was scrolling through all the different hotels, and just a night or two in, and he was already, you know, reaching for a hotel room. He was just nervous about camping anywhere in Denver. Um, it's not like I've been doing this for 14 years or something and know what I'm doing, where to hide, but he just didn't trust it. And yeah, decided to spend the money on a hotel room downtown. So I forget if I argued with him or not. I learned it's best not to argue with him when he gets a little stubborn, especially in the hotel room thing. And yeah, so we went for that. And then in the next morning, woke up. The next brewery we had to film at was also in Denver. It was called Woods Boss. So we went on over there, same shtick, met the owner, walk around, tasting, B-roll. Pretty good beer over there too, in Woods Boss. And they had a whole new space opening up. It was very cool, actually. And really enjoyed that again. And our next step, the next day, we had to film at Avery Brewing in Boulder. So we hopped on over. There's just like a cheap little public transit bus that goes because Denver and Boulder are damn near attached. So we hopped the bus to get on up there, and Nick had realized he lost his laptop charger probably at the hotel. He'd gone back there, and they didn't have it. They didn't know about it. So when we hopped off the bus in Boulder, he was just dead set on getting to Best Buy, and I told him we were a block away from Pearl Street. Anyone who's been to Boulder knows that Pearl Street is kind of like their version of, I don't know, the Santa Monica Pier or Bourbon Street or Beale Street or whatever. Just kind of the main pedestrian drag. And I'm like, dude, you've never been to Boulder before. So this is Nick's first time going everywhere that we went. Literally everywhere we went was a first for him. So I'm like, yeah, you should check this out. He's like, no, I got to go to Best Buy. I'm like, Best Buy doesn't close for 2 hours, and this road is literally parallel to this road. We can just walk up in the same direction. We just walk a block over, and it's going to be more entertaining. And he just kind of grumbled and literally walked away. So I'm like, all right, well, fuck it. So I went over to Pearl Street and walked up and down and just, I've been there before, but just wanted to see. There's people juggling fire and street musicians and just good people watching. Boulder's kind of a college town, so it's good kind of mix of people. So I was enjoying that, walking up and down, and finally walked on up to Best Buy. By the time I got there, he was just walking out, and I think he'd gotten his laptop charger. And talked him into going to a brewery on the way out because Avery is up on the northwest corner of town. And between where we were and there, I saw there's like a hiking trail and probably some pretty easy places for us to camp. So he was down for that, that camping night. So we stopped at a brewery just for a quick beer, walked on up to the hiking trail. Sure enough, found a good place where he was able to set up his tent, and not too far, I was able to set up my bivvy. Woke up in the morning, got it moving up to Avery. It was like an hour walk away or thereabouts, and Avery was freaking amazing. It was definitely the biggest brewery we filmed at. I'm gonna take a sip of beer right now. I'm drinking a double fudge brownie chocolate imperial stout. How about that? So Avery was the biggest brewery that we filmed at by far. 100 something employees there. Just massive. If you've been to Colorado, you know about Avery. So really good spot, and lucky for us, Adam Avery himself, the founder and owner, personally wanted to take us around. So that was kind of an honor for sure, and really cool. He showed up. He was hungover. I was hungover. It was perfect, and we were just on the level. He walked us all around. Then we got some hair of the dog in us, and he's one of the only people who just poured the exact same flight that he poured for me. So he was just drinking right alongside me, going through beer by beer. Super passionate guy. Really just loves his beer. You know, that brewery's been around since I forget what year, early '90s, and still he's just into it. You know, really cool. So we did our whole thing there. All the B-roll, all the bartenders and stuff were really nice. So just kicking us free beers as we filmed our B-roll and got some food there and whatnot. And the next place we had to film was in Salt Lake City. So we had a bit of a jump to make, and this was going to be our first hitchhiking of the trip. So it was still daylight out kind of when we left, and we did manage to hitch one ride to the next town. I think it was Longmont, and it was getting dark. So again, convinced Nick to go to a little beer bar, something, had a beer. Met a dude there who said he might be able to put us up, but we weren't going to know for hours and hours whether he could or not. So we just kind of kept walking, and it was a long walk that night. We walked for a couple hours, and it was just kind of wide open, nowhere to really camp. Finally, we found like an overpass sort of bridge situation, and we camped under the bridge, which was convenient because it was raining in the morning. So that bridge also kept us dry. But yeah, obviously we had to walk out into the rain and start hitchhiking. We got a ride from a guy, didn't speak any English, Spanish speaking guy. It was unclear where he was going, and I was trying to explain where we were going, which was Salt Lake City. and I don't think he fully understood this, and I think he was just going to take us to the next town, like Fort Collins, but it wasn't clear if he was doing that for as a favor or if he was going there too. And at one point he stopped, and I understand some Spanish, and he was asking me if I knew how to drive and if I wanted to drive, and he was telling me to drive to where I was going. I was like, "We're going to Salt Lake City." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." And I'm like, "Dude, you don't get this." So I told him, he asked how far it was, and I'm like, 7 hours away in Spanish. And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he just drove us to Fort Collins to the south end. So that's why I think he probably wasn't just going there. He just kind of went out of his way. So we get dropped off, pouring rain, south of Fort Collins, all sidewalk, hard to hitchhike through like a sidewalk city. Just hard to hitchhike in the middle of any city because people aren't going far. So we tucked away in a Dunkin' Donuts for a little bit and finally got moving. And we walked for an hour or two through the rain, pretty much just to get to the north side of the city where it'd be easier to hitch a ride. And it was. We got a ride from a woman there to the highway to I-80, and then we got a ride from an 18-wheeler truck driver who had a pet bunny rabbit. That was pretty cool. Hadn't seen that one before. Pet bunny in a 18-wheeler truck, and that was a long ride. He got us almost to Salt Lake City, just to the junction. He was cutting up to Ogden, and from there we managed to hitch a ride in the back of a pickup truck the rest of the way to Salt Lake. Got there, saw my friend Cam. Shout out to Cam. And we stayed with Cam for the duration of Salt Lake City. We had 2 breweries to film at there. So we did a bunch of cool stuff with Cam, went hiking and hanging out, lounging, uh, hit a little brewery or two, and then we filmed at Epic Brewing there, as well as Bewilder. Both breweries are great. Epic's one of my favorite breweries, just period. Their tap room is not that gigantic or anything, but their beers are gigantic, and they have amazing beers. So filmed there, did our thing. Bewilder did her thing, hung out with Cam and some of my other friends in Salt Lake, and just enjoyed Salt Lake as usual. And from there, we're going up to Wyoming next. So Cam one morning dropped us off like on I-80 just outside of the city. We managed to hitch a ride in the back of a pickup truck going up, and then this guy picked us up, and he was just kind of didn't know what he was doing. He's like, I think I was gonna try to go to Salt Lake, but I think I might have passed it." I'm like, "You definitely did. It's right back there." He's like, "Where are you guys going?" We're like, We're going to Jackson, so we're trying to keep going down this road as far as Evanston, and that's our next turn." He's like, "All right, I'll take you." He ended up saying he was gonna go all the way to Yellowstone, just on a whim. So he took us to Evanston and then halfway up to Jackson, and he just got tired, so he wanted to stop to sleep. That was a kind of a crazy ride. He just went out of his way and did that, just on a random mission. Another sip of beer here, y'all. Excellent. So we managed to hitch another 3, 4, or 5 short rides. Got to Jackson. No, or not to Jackson, south of Jackson, Alpine, where my mom's got a house, but she's spending the summer up at this campground as a camp host, putting out fires, making sure people are doing the right thing. She's up there 6 days a week. But my sister's living in her house, so we caught up with her, and it was the day my mom came in, so caught up with her too. We actually went to Melvin for dinner, which is where we would end up filming. So hung out with my sister, and I guess it was just the next day. We filmed at Melvin, which I was really looking forward to. Great brewery, and yeah, did our whole thing there. Uh, Tour tasting B-roll. Hung out with my sister and her friends, and we also went up to the campground where my mom was at with her boyfriend and spent a night up there. We went on down to, we spent some nights in Jackson just screwing around, like bar hopping and stuff, and then also filmed at Roadhouse Brewery, which is right in Jackson. Also a great time. We filmed with them at both of their locations. They hooked us up with some food too, kind of showcased that. Made that one a little extra special. And yeah, had a good time. We even thought about filming at Snake River Brewery, which has been there forever, but they're under construction. So we stopped in and we kind of filmed a tasting. I don't know if it's gonna make the cut or not. Yeah, we weren't able to go on a tour or really taste a bunch of beer. Just kind of cracked a couple cans of beer and shot the shit with them and filmed it. So I don't know if that footage will make it in there or not. But directly after that, we decided to hitchhike up to our next location, which was Bozeman, Montana, and got some good rides. We ended up getting a ride in this van from this guy who popped open a beer for me, and he actually lives at Old Faithful, the geyser in Yellowstone. He's a medic, so there's like a campus or a dorm or whatever the situation is there. He lives literally at it. So that was cool. We popped out and Convinced Nick he should probably take a look at it. Like, most famous feature, the most famous national park in one of the best countries in the world. It's like, yeah, we're right here. If you want to look at it, I've seen it a few times, but you might want to check it out. So we did. We waited, and it went off like 20 minutes after we got there. Good old faithful, blasting in the air, and caught some pickup truck rides getting out of there. Cool couple gave us a ride, and then finally, this car full of cool people gave us a ride up to Bozeman. But where they dropped us off, we were about 7 miles from downtown, and downtown is where all the action is. And also, my uncle has a barn on a rental property there where he was going to let us stay. There's no water, but electricity. I'd stayed there last summer. So we're 7 miles away, which is like, a 2 hour walk, basically. I'm like, we might as well try to hitchhike because it's like almost too short to hitchhike, but like, well, give it a shot. And we got a ride really quick from this guy in a pickup truck, which ended up being really cool. So this guy asked what we were doing. We said we were filming this beer show. He's like, "Oh, I know all the brewers in town, basically, and all the owners." And he's like, "I'm actually doing this beer run at Bozeman Brewing tomorrow, or the day after. I think it's tomorrow." And he's like, "Actually, my girlfriend, we were just had a day out, and we're gonna go grab a beer and a pizza at this Nordic brewing." So he's like, "Y'all can either join us for that, or you can just take my truck downtown and park it somewhere," which is super trusting and awesome for someone you've been riding with for a mile or two. We've known him for 2 minutes, and he was offering to just give us his truck and park it somewhere, uh, which is pretty cool. But we're like, I like the idea of like grabbing a beer and a pizza with you and your girlfriend even better. So we did that, which was a smart move because we got to talking and becoming friendly. And then he's after beer and pizza. Um, he's like, "Yeah, I know this spot just outside of town, by a lake or whatever, and we can have a big old bonfire." So we went to the gas station, grabbed a bunch of firewood and some more beer. Went on out there, had a big bonfire, and like kicked it until I don't know 1 in the morning or something. Just shooting the shit, telling stories, getting to know each other, and then he came and dropped us on off at the barn, and yeah, slept there for the night, and then started getting to it. So in Bozeman, we had two breweries to film at. The first one was Map Brewing. No, the first one was Mountains Walking, and they make a lot of big old beers, tasty beers, kind of different beers. I made a beer with steamed rice. Like, they're all over the map. They make solid beers and like experimental kind of beers alike, and do a good job at both, which makes me want to take another sip of this beer. Excellent. So yeah, actually, the before we filmed there, we spent part of the day with that guy's girlfriend. Just bike. She had extra bikes. They had extra bikes, so we biked around and hit some breweries and stuff like that with her, and went to that beer run as well at Bozeman Brewing, and obviously drank some beers, met some cool people, saw these people running like a 5K basically, and drinking some beer and having some barbecue. So altogether, a good time in Bozeman. I usually have a good time in Bozeman. And yeah, we filmed at Mountains Walking, like I said, and then I think it was the next day we filmed at Map Brewing, which is right above like a little pond where people paddleboard, and just a beautiful spot. Good beer as well. Met the owner, met some brewers, all that good stuff. Did our typical spiel, walk and talk and drink, and B-roll. And yeah, hung out with my uncle. I ran into my cousin at a coffee shop. She happened to be in town. She lives in Missoula, but she was just in town visiting with a friend of hers. So hung out with those guys, and then finally got moving. And our next spot was Missoula, but I had a friend who I thought lived in Bozeman, but turned out he lived in Helena. So I'm like, all right, that's halfway. Let's go spend a night at his place. So that's what we did. We hitched some rides, got over there to Helena, spent a night with my buddy Am, Sourdough. I met him the first year or something I was hitchhiking at a mutual couch surfing host, who's now a good friend, Larry, in Phoenix. So I've seen Am a couple few times, so it's good to catch up with him. He dropped us off at the edge of town in the next morning, and we hitched on over to Missoula, where we were going to film at Kettle House next. And the last ride we got was from this guy in the National Guard, and by the time we got to Missoula, he was offering to let us crash in his backyard, which just cool. So we went directly to his house. Nick dropped his bag off there, and I kept my bag because there's a few you know just camera stuff and other stuff that I had, and my bag's pretty small, so it's basically like might as well take everything. So I just kept everything on me. We walked in, hit a few breweries that day, and we were at the third brewery, I believe Guild, having a beer, and then Nick wanted to go back to the dude's house, and I was wanting to have one more beer. So Nick took off back to the guy's house who'd picked us up hitchhiking earlier, and I had another beer, and I ended up meeting these two guys. One was a brewer in town, and one was a brewer at a big Kansas City brewery. So I chatted with them. They took off. I finished my beer, and on the walk back to the guy's house, there's another Kettle House, the brewery we were going to film at the next day. They had another location, so I'm like, I might as well pop in for one beer and maybe get a little footage while I'm in here. And sure enough, those two brewers I just met, they had also made their way there. So shot the shit with them while I'm drinking a beer with them. I got a message from my cousin, and she was telling me the one I'd seen in Bozeman who lives in Missoula, where I am now, and she's like, you can crash here tonight if you want to. So I'm like, oh, hell yeah. Well, Nick's going to stay with that dude who picked us up hitchhiking, and I'll just come on over. So that's what I did. Um, Nick ended up, the guy offered to just let him sleep on the couch because it was just him. So that worked out well for him and worked out good for me. I was able to catch up with my cousin some more and crash on the floor there in her living room. Get a shower in the morning, all that good stuff. And yeah, I spent the day just tooling around Missoula, checking stuff out, hanging by the river. I went to the brewery, Cranky Sam's. I had met the brewer the night before. Went there. Nick, for the first time ever, hitchhiked on his own. He decided to hitchhike. The Kettle House Brewery was just like 10 minutes outside of Missoula, kind of. So he hitchhiked a couple rides there. He was pretty stoked. He got there like 5 hours early, and all the buses were free in Missoula. So I was like, oh, okay. He's like, I'm here already. I'm like, oh, did you take the free bus? He's like, I hitchhiked. I'm like, oh, okay. That works. So I just took the free bus from downtown, got there, and met up in this beautiful spot, Kettle House. People say it's actually one of the number one concert venues in Montana. And it is freaking amazing. So really cool. The river's running right through there. It's kind of in a gorge, I guess you call it, and real nice and good beer too. So had a bunch of beer with one of the brewers. Did the whole tour tasting B-roll kind of thing, and man, makes me want to take another sip of beer. Thank God, I got some left. How convenient. All right. Yes, we did our whole thing, and there's a guy on Trust Routes I had stayed with just south of Missoula the summer previous, so I've been in touch with him. He was down to host both of us, so we hitched a ride from Kettle House to and south of Missoula, where Ed picked me up, Trust Routes host, and yeah, we I think we grabbed a beer and some food and stuff, and then headed back to his place. And Nick passed out, and I stayed up with Ed for a while, just talking, catching up, hearing what he'd been doing, all that sort of thing. He was getting up real early the next day, so passed out and got up fairly early, and he gave us a ride a little bit south towards the job site he was working on. And at this point, we are making our way to Boise. It was going to be one of the longer hitchhikes of the trip. I think it would have been an 8-hour drive or something straight. So I was hoping we could do it in a day. I was pretty confident, and we did. We made it in a day. Got some good rides. Very first ride was this girl going way far south, so that knocked out the first 2 or 3 hours right away. And then yeah, we started inching rides up. Another couple cool girls picked us up going to Stanley and so forth, and rafting guides. All kinds of people gave us rides that day. And in Boise, there's this girl who picked me up 3 or 4 years ago, leaving Boise, and we had stayed in touch. And now I've seen her the last couple times I've been in Boise. So she was down to host both of us, which was awesome. So that's what we did. Met up with her, kicked it that night, and I believe the next day we just had one brewery to film in Boise, and a really good one called Barbarian Brewing. So that's what we did. Got up, met up at the brewery, regrouped there. Um, Met up with Bree, one of the owners, and she did the whole walk around tasting, etc., with me and filmed some B-roll. And their brewery is under construction. They're actually moving locations. But Nick wanted to go film at the brewery that is about to shut down. I didn't really think it mattered too much, but he was down to do it. So I'm like, yeah, whatever, extra footage, go for it. So he got a ride from one of the owners or something over there. I finished drinking and getting B-roll at the main spot, and then my friend, the girl picked me up hitchhiking to his house we were staying at. She came and met up with me, and we went down to the river, met up with some other people I'd met the last time. Uh, Went and had some drinks, and eventually Nick was back in the area. Told him where we were at. He linked up with us, and yeah, we just cruised around playing shuffleboard, drinking some beers, drinking some cocktails even, and wound up back at the house again, chilling. And one of my new friends there offered to give us a ride out to Mill 95, a hop processing plant we'd agreed to film at on our way to Bend, Oregon, which was great because it was like 45 minutes away, and it saved us from having to hitchhike directly out of the city. So that's what happened in the morning. Got our showers in, and he came, scooped us up, and drove us at 45 minutes out to Mill 95. And I'd never been to a hop processing plant. I've been to well over 1,000 breweries before, and most of the time I actually get back into the brewery, or plenty of times anyway. So it was cool to see that whole process. And obviously we filmed that. We filmed a little tour. There's no tasting or anything, but we filmed a tour with one of the guys there, just seeing how they process and pelletize hops. Really cool for me. I think it'll be cool for a lot of other people to see too. So I was stoked that we got to do that. And yeah, then the goal was to still try to get to Bend in a single day, the next place that we had to film. There are two breweries there we had lined up. Ended up being just one, which I'll get to. So we started walking. We ended up getting a ride from a hop farmer. That was pretty cool. It wasn't a long ride, but I was just like, huh, that's pretty sweet. He gave me his hat, which I've already lost. Shitty with hats. Um, and then we got another couple rides, and we got to this one junction, and we were just there forever. We were there for hours, just like, man, it was not going, not going quickly at that point. Another sip of beer, just thinking about that dry waiting. So just before sunset, what do you know? We get the ride. The guy's going all the way to and through Bend. Um, yeah, that was great. Nick was scanning around. Where should we camp? Nick was big on that, just always saying like, if we were waiting for more than an hour, he'd start looking around like, where do you think we should camp? I'm like, I don't know. It's 2 p.m. Maybe have a little faith. Have a little faith. We'll get a ride. Don't need to worry about where to camp until we need to. So we got there to Bend, and man, this all rolls into one little thing. So I know this guy from Salt Lake City who was a brewer, and he ended up moving to Bend and working for 10 Barrel. And I stayed with him one time and actually worked for a few days at the brewery on their bottling line. And yeah, I was like, we should film at 10 Barrel. And I was kind of like thinking, should we? Because 10 Barrel is owned by Embev. They weren't originally. They weren't when my buddy first started working there. But I'm like, damn, they still make good beer. And my buddy works there. And when I'd worked on the bottling line, I'd met one of the other big brewers there, and he's a super friendly dude, really cool. I'd been in touch with him too, about filming there. So uh, my friend had said maybe we could stay with him while we were there, but lo and behold, we get there and he's just not responding to any of my texts. It's not the first time this guy's done this, so it wasn't a big shocker. It's like, all right, well, he's not responding. And the other friend, I hadn't mentioned anything to him about staying with him, and I wasn't expecting that, but he never responded the whole time I was in town either. So we're just sitting at this bar, and I'm looking up campsites and stuff, and then Nick wants to veto the campsite thing. He wants to go to a hotel room. So he finds some, I don't know, $60, $70 hotel room less than a mile away, or maybe a mile away. Rainbow Hotel or something like that. So we're walking towards it, and I'm just like, I found this place to camp. Like, it's right next to 10 Barrel, where we're supposed to film the next day. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. There's too many people around. However, Nick, like a lot of people in this country, are pretty prejudiced against homeless people. And, like, it's a normal thing, I guess. And just, I don't know, he thinks everyone wants to rob him. And I'm like, all right, I get the prejudice, I guess. But also, like, one of my rules for stealth camping is I try to camp in places where if I died in the middle of the night, no one would find my body, which is to say, pretty damn well hidden. And this was one of those spots. I'm like, I don't know why you want to spend money on a hotel. Like, we both have camping gear, and I found a spot. But he was real adamant about it, and I was like, all right, whatever. It's your money. If you want to do it, too. And then he was saying he wanted to book it for 2 nights. And again, I was kind of knew better than to argue with him, because, like I said, he can just be stubborn about it and kind of start getting upset if you start giving him advice. But I'm just like, 2 nights, dude. Like, all sorts of magic can happen. Like, we could meet someone at the brewery. He might be able to put us up. My friend might actually get in touch, and we could stay with him. Like, why commit to 2 nights? But like, all right, whatever. I'm just trying to let it go. But the logic in me is just like really, I don't know, wanting to help, saving money, and open up our opportunities and whatnot. So we get to this like rainbow hotel. Ring the buzzer. This guy comes and says that it's full. And then Nick starts arguing with the guy, like looking in the parking lot. He's like, it doesn't look full. And I don't know, he's not shouting at the guy, but like just shy of shouting, just arguing back and forth. Just like, hey, the dude said the place is full. He's not lying. He would take our money. So I'm just standing there, just like, oh my God, this is a little awkward. Uh, Finally, Nick gives up arguing with the guy, and we walk. He's ferocious on his phone. I'm like, we're actually walking towards that campsite, and he doesn't want to hear it. So we get to the next hotel, which might be like a budget hotel, and same thing. They're full. He doesn't argue this time. That dude's super chill and trying to give us more advice. And we walk up, and then Nick just plops down and he's on his phone. And, I'm like, we're even closer to that campsite. And he's just not wanting to hear it. I'm like, all right. So next thing I know, he's on his phone, making a phone call and booking some kind of room and check in. And I don't know, sort of arguing with the person on that phone too. But eventually, he just starts walking. He's like, "So are you gonna camp or are you gonna stay in the hotel?" I'm like, "Well, if you got a hotel room, I'm obviously not gonna not stay in it." So I just follow him, and we go to the DoubleTree right downtown. I found out that he booked 2 nights, cost him like $500. Like, and I'm just like, "Oh my God." This dude was so stubborn that he decided to spend $250 a night and book 2 nights. I don't know, just to make a point. Just I don't know what. I was. We got to the hotel room. He didn't say a word. Just conked out. So I just plugged in all my stuff, started uploading files, conked out myself. Woke up in the morning, and found out that 10 Barrel had canceled on us. It was Juneteenth. It was a holiday, except it wasn't the holiday, but I guess it was declared a federal holiday a day before the actual holiday, which I've never really liked. I sort of get the point. It's like this happened St. Patrick's Day once, where I was in Denver and it was like March 15th, and they're like, it's St. Patrick's Day. I'm like, fuck it, cool, bonus St. Patrick's Day. So there's parades and all that, and I celebrated. And then actual St. Patrick's Day came around, and no one was doing anything. I'm like, today's actually St. Patrick's Day. I know we all celebrated on a Saturday to be cool, and I know it's Monday, but I don't know. So same thing. And I don't know why they didn't figure that out earlier until the day of to let us know that um, weren't going to be able to film. But I was like, oh. So Nick started getting up, and I'm like, 10 Barrel canceled on us. He's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, well, got a free day in Bend. So I decided I was going to walk around, see how many breweries I could go to in a day just on my own, popping around, because Nick was in his mood from the last night, and I think he sort of wanted to embrace the hotel room that he paid so much for. So I don't think he really left the room, probably. Um, so he stayed there all day. I spent the day going to, I think I hit up like 8 different breweries just around town. Just popped in for a beer or two at each, depending on how much my attention got. Speaking of beer, still got some. Taking a sip. Yeah. So I spent the day in Bend going to those 8 breweries. I believe it was 8 on the dot. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. The universe had told me that 10 Barrel was not a place that I should have gone to. So the whole struggle I had in my head, like, should I go to an Ambev-owned brewery? Clearly, the universe was just like, nope, your two buddies aren't going to message you. The one girl that I had heard on a podcast I was stoked to meet, she had passed me over to someone else, and then that person had canceled on me ultimately. So it's like, all right, that's the universe saying, screw off 10 Barrel. Apologies to the good people at 10 Barrel, but the universe has spoken. So I enjoyed going to all those breweries anyways. Passed out another night in the plush old DoubleTree right there downtown. And woke up and Nick got going first, and we ended up regrouping at Bevel Brewery, which was awesome. So the one brewery we did film at in Bend, which I had not been to before, owned by two disc golf champions. An amazing place, super friendly, really good beers. And yeah, did our whole thing, walk around tour, tasting, B-roll. And one of our lavalier microphones had broken, or at least the transmitter was broken. So there's some sort of warranty situation going on. But I had suggested just getting one from Best Buy and then maybe returning it after using it for a while. And Nick thought that was a good idea too. So we finished filming, and we had to leave to Washington. We were filming at a place up in Yakima more or less the next day, and the Best Buy was at the north side of town. And it was like an hour and a half walk, but the highway was right next to us. So I'd suggested, I didn't realize that Nick wasn't really listening to me, that we could walk it, or we could just go to the highway and maybe even stop at this other brewery called Crux, which we had almost filmed at as well, and probably get there just as fast, if not faster, just by hitchhiking. So we're out in the parking lot, and I think I was taking another video walking away or something, and next thing I know, Nick is like across the parking lot and walking north as if he's going to walk the hour and a half, and I'm like, yo, Nick. And he could hear me, but he just decided to ignore me. Kept walking, and I'm like, okay. So I texted him, like, yo, uh, where are you going? And he said he was going to Best Buy, and seemed kind of like angry. So I told him there's a faster way, and he just sort of ignored that. So I'm like, all right, well, in case we get separated, you know where the next brewery is, like 3 hours north, but also I'll probably just meet you at Best Buy. And so I went down to the highway. Right next to it is this Crux Brewing, bunch of live music. I wish we'd gotten to film there. We were in touch with them. We were supposed to, just the timing didn't work out with the day. So I popped in, grabbed a good beer, listened to the music real quick, kind of sloshed the beer down, and hit the highway. Hitched a ride from someone who was going north of town, pretty close to the Best Buy. Best Buy was maybe a mile off the highway. They dropped me off right there, and I think in the ride, I asked Nick where he was, and he asked me if I had hitched a ride, and I said yeah, and then he texted me back like, I fucking bet you did, and then he sent me like a middle finger emoji and some shit. It just got like really weird really quickly, and I was like, all right, well, I'm up here by the Best Buy now. Like, are you there, or have you gotten on the road, or what's your deal? And he just stopped responding altogether. So at that point, I wasn't sure if he was just like doing the 16-year-old girlfriend ghosting thing, or if he'd gotten a ride and gotten out of service, because north of Bend, there's not a whole lot, I guess. So I'm like, all right, maybe wouldn't expect him to just ignore me at this point. So I waited around for like an hour or something and just didn't hear from him, wasn't responding. So I'm like, fuck it, I guess he's started hitching north. So I'm like, not a lot of daylight. So I managed to hitch one ride before it got dark. I got a little bit up the road, found a place to camp, and woke up in the morning, still no word from Nick. So got up early because we had to be at this brewery like relatively early. It was Father's Day, and I knew that this the brewer up there was down to film, but I knew he wanted to spend the day with his family. Have a sip of beer. So I got up real early, started hitching. Finally, I got to Biggs Junction, like an hour south or so of Yakima. Finally heard from Nick. He had thought that when I had hitched a ride, I just left town and ditched him. Why he didn't respond when I told him I was right by the Best Buy and all that, I'll never know. He was, I don't know, angry, not thinking, whatever, but cleared it up. And even dumber than that, like, it took like, I don't know, 8 or 9 back and forth text messages at least to sort of clear up what had happened. And at this point, I'm in Biggs Junction and I'm walking and still figuring I got a hitch. And after every message I sent to him, it's like, blah, 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 blah. Where are you at? And he'd say, blah, blah, blah. And I go, blah, 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 blah. Are you still in Bend? Da, da, da. And I go, blah, 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 blah. Are you up in Washington? So he refrained from telling me where he was, which was silly because I found out later that he was exactly where I was. He was just inside of the fucking McDonald's or something. So had he just told me where he was, we were in the same exact spot, like precisely, like 100 feet away from each other. So whatever. I hitched a few rides on my own. Got up to Yakima. He did the same. He got a ride from a preacher or something. So he was maybe an hour or so behind me. He managed to get to the brewery just a little bit late, but more or less on time. Like I was with the brewer and I was about to just film the whole thing on my own with the equipment that I have, because I wasn't hearing from him. And then boom, he walked in. So I'm like, all right, perfect. So we were able to set up and do a proper uh, film. And after we were done filming, we were able to actually talk. And he was in a good mood because we, kind of cleared up the miscommunication and told me what he had done. So he had, gotten pissed off, thought that I left town, started hitching himself, and he'd gotten all the way to that junction that night, camped somewhere around there, and I was just hanging out. And at least we had linked back up, and spirits were good. So we hitched from that brewer's Wandering Hop, super cool, really cool brewer. They had a couple locations actually. We were in their Zilla location right outside of Yakima. So we had to hitch from there. We were next heading to Leavenworth, Washington. So we had to get through Yakima. We got a ride to Yakima. It kind of sucked. It was super hot. Both of us are fairly fair skinned. I mean, Nick's a damn ginger. And, we got that Irish skin too. We burn easy. So, not feeling the sun, he's like, let's just, tuck in somewhere in the shade or something. So I'm like, all right, as long as we're moving, let's just walk across town too, because we were in a bad spot for hitchhiking anyway. So we walked a good hour or more after taking a break in the shade, getting some water, getting to the north end of town. Nick's cursing Yakima. I didn't have much great to say about it either, to be honest. And managed to hitch a ride sort of out of there. Then getting kind of on sunset. Nick's, like I said, looking around like, where are we going to camp? I'm like, have faith. And sure enough, this dude picked us up and he was going not all the way to Leavenworth, but about an hour south to the next good junction. But by the time we got there, it was sunset. And it stays light until like about 10. So Nick was like, if we don't get a ride by 10, I'm getting us a hotel room at the Econo Lodge. I'm like, all right. Because, again, I didn't want to argue with him about this kind of stuff. And after he just dropped $500 in Bend, the $60 or $70 Econo Lodge, he was fucking giddy about how cheap it was relatively. So I'm like, all right, I'm not going to take this joy from him. Like, even though there's a place to camp here or there in the other spot, whatever, let's do it. So sure enough, 10 o'clock rolled around, no rides. So we popped into the Econo Lodge. Like I said, he was super excited. Um, I think that's the happiest I saw him the whole trip, the Econo Lodge. So we popped in there, spent the night, a little free continental kind of breakfast in the morning. Walked out of the kind of town there, managed to hitch a few rides, get on up, got a ride from some chick who used to sell dildos, and I'm pretty sure she's killed some folks. Yeah, just a little serial killer kind of woman. Couldn't prove it, but she just seemed like the type to kill some people. And she had some stories to kind of go with it. I don't know, whatever. Not gonna curse her name. Start cross-referencing dildo salesman in Washington. Don't want anyone to find out who she is. So, anyways, beyond that, we got to Leavenworth and Unkilled, and we were filming at a doghouse there. So Nick went and grabbed a coffee. I went and grabbed a beer at a different brewery there. Ran into the guy from Wandering Hop, Nate. He was at a Blewett Brewery there. I think doing a collab or something. Taking a sip of beer. Running out of beer here. Then I met up with Nick at the doghouse, did the whole thing there too. It's they claim to be the smallest bar in Washington, so definitely one of the smaller breweries. So we filmed there, drank up their beer, filmed everything, and then went and met up with a friend of mine who I'd met there years ago. And she went and grabbed a couple beers with us, ended up offering to let us stay with her in a house she was house sitting at. We went to another cool bar, I think it was called the Bee and Bushel. And again, we saw Nate, the brewer from Wandering Hop. And yeah, had a good night. Just drinking some beers, catching up with friends, that kind of thing. And in the morning, kind of wandered around town with my friend a little bit, getting a little breakfast burrito, coffee, all that stuff. Got back and Nick was ready to go, so we hit the road. Hitched a ride from this cool couple out of Leavenworth, out north of Seattle and Everett, and managed to get a uh, ride from this real estate guy who's super cool. He knew a lot of the breweries in Bellingham and the area. We were on our way just north of Bellingham to Ferndale. A friend of mine, Scott, owns a brewery called Fringe. I'd met him at beer camp back when he was homebrewing, and now he owns a brewery. So I'm like, we're definitely putting you in the show. I'm gonna hang out and couch surf with him as well. So this real estate agent was heading to Bellingham, and he's like, if you want, you can come and hang out at my office for like an hour, and like actually there's a couple breweries nearby, and once I'm done with work, I'll run you on up to your buddy's place. I'm like, hell yeah! So that's what we did. We went to his real estate spot. Had a couple beers with him there that he just had in the fridge. He had to go work. He pointed us to a brewery around the corner. Grabbed a beer there. By the time we were done, he was done, ready to go, and indeed drove us up to Scott's brewery up there, Fringe, and met up with him. Had some beers. Waited for him to get off work. Went back to his place. Kicked it. Had a good time. And then I think it was the next day. It's either the next day or the day after we were ready to film with him, but he had a buddy who also owned a brewery who was using his keg cleaner. He's like, you can go film an episode with him if you want. So we did. That's Atwood Brewing. So we went up. It's just a mile and a half south of the Canadian border in a little farmhouse. There's no tap room, but we went and saw his little farmhouse. Beautiful. That's going to be some badass footage when it comes out. And the beers are spectacular, real unique beers, so that was a bonus. Filmed with him, and then we went down to Scott's and did the proper episode with Scott. Walking, talking, tasting, B-roll, all that good stuff, and then headed back to his place. And at that point, people had pointed us to a brewery in Bellingham. So the next day, I believe we filmed at Stemma Brewing, did an episode with them, stayed another night at Scott's, and then finally got on the road. We had thought about filming in Seattle proper, but we decided to film at this one brewery at the advice of some friends in Marysville, just north of Seattle, called Five Rights. And while we'd been at that farmhouse, we met these beer bloggers just in passing who were doing a story on Atwood as well. And just randomly, they picked us up hitchhiking that day. They just saw us on the road and stopped and recognized us and gave us a ride. And of course, being Washington beer bloggers, they knew exactly where Five Rights was, so they dropped us off in the area. We waited around until it was time to film. Had an awesome time. My buddy indeed came over, Brandon, uh, which I wasn't totally expecting. I thought maybe he'd drop in, so it was really cool to see that he did. And ended up spending the night at his place, just having a good night, drinking some beers. Yeah, good times all around. Catching up. And in the morning, it was time to head on south. We were going to probably pause in Seattle, see a friend of Nick's, but we had nowhere to film there. Portland was the finish line, really. So we got, I think just, yeah, one solid ride straight to Seattle. Went to a brewery where Nick's friend met us, went to another brewery. By that point, his friend offered to let us crash for the night. Take one of my last sips of beer here. So we stayed with his friend for the night after hitting a few breweries, just casually. Um, got a big old sushi dinner, I believe. Good times all around. And yeah, in the morning, he dropped us off at an on-ramp, and we're doing really good on time. We had plenty of time. We had a few extra days more than we kind of had planned on. and there was a big heat wave coming through. It was supposed to be 115 degrees in Portland, so we weren't in a hurry to get there. I was like, let's just go to the coast and hang out there, and yeah, just be a little bit cooler, and no need to get to Portland right away necessarily. So I started angling towards the coast, and it was pretty hot where we were too. So we were just cooking all day. Good rides though. And finally, we got pretty much to the coast, and then this guy. Oh, we hit up a brewery called Wild Man Brewing, just to pop in right as they were closing. But the girl's like, "You can have a few beers while I clean up and stuff." So that was really nice of her. So I was drinking some beers. Nick was on water at that point. We'd gotten a really cool ride just before that because it was hot as balls. And I'm like, dude, let's walk a mile up here, and there's a river, and I think we can just like kind of get in for a second. So Nick was on board with that idea. So we got in, and then we are kind of out of the water, just sitting in the shade. And this guy and his girlfriend or something, they'd gotten in the water. I'd heard him crack a beer, and then he was driving away and stopped, and he's like, "Hey, I figured I'd share a beer with you." So he's like, "You can grab one from the back there." So I went and grabbed a beer from the back, and I was like, "Hey, you don't happen to be going to such and such town?" And he was. So he gave us a ride. So that's how we got to that town where a wild man, I think it was called Raymond, was the town. So had some beers at that spot, and then started walking to the road. No plan really, just see where we would wind up, and uh, probably camp was sort of what was in my head. And this really cool dude picked us up. Um, he used to do a bunch of train hopping and traveling himself, sort of shooting the shit, and asked where he was going. He's like, "I'm just out cruising." He's like, "I work in Washington and just felt like taking a drive for the weekend. We got the days off because of the big heat wave." I'm like, "Oh, cool." And then he's like, "I was actually thinking of maybe going all the way to Portland." And I'm like, "Fuck it. Let's go." So we took the whole scenic way and eventually got to Portland that night. Might as well. Stayed with my friend Stephanie. She was down to put us up for the whole time we were there. Um, yeah, and then there we were in Portland, finish line. Hitchhiking was basically over. And in Portland, we had two breweries to film at, plus a third brewery that was doing a special release party with us. They did sort of a collab beer in our honor. Got a graphic designer to make a can with a whole spiel about the hopping show on it and stuff. And he had talked to me about like what he wanted the artwork to look like, and then so the two breweries, that special brewery with the release party at the end, and before that, the plan was to go to uh, as many breweries on foot as we could, thanks to John Lovegrove, who was planning that out. I once went to 61 breweries in a day with him, but we had cars and stuff, drivers, so he wanted to see how many we could go to in a day just walking. So that's what we kind of had left to film. So got to it. A friend of mine flew into town. She was just trying to get out of Kansas City for a minute. Liz Stewart, some of y'all might know her. She just wanted to get out of town, and she'd never been to Portland. So she came the day that we filmed at Breakside, which is one of my favorite breweries of the trip. So we went to Breakside, filmed there, did the whole spiel, drank fucking amazing beers. So good. And just catching up with everybody. And John had come out for that, John Lovegrove, and um, Stephanie showed up, and it was just a big old blast of fun. So we head back to the house, and this is where things start getting weird. The drama of the trip. So I'm at the house, and we're all chatting. It's me and John and Nick and Stephanie, and Liz is passing out on the couch. She'd been flying or whatever, so she was getting tired. Stephanie passed out eventually, and then John was asking about the show, and I was telling him how it's going, all the breweries we've been through. Take another sip of beer. And he was asking about the filming and all that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we gotta film a wrap up thing, and just kind of talk about the whole trip, kind of like what I'm doing right now." But Nick and I were gonna film it, just the two of us talking about it. If you watch season one, the finale, you kind of see us sitting in my friend's garage, and we talk about the whole trip, and Gary pastes in all these clips and stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, I think we gotta do that and have it that go out through the whole season because Nick hasn't filmed a lot of the hitchhiking, and he hasn't really filmed enough of the travel part." And then Nick got upset because I've been criticizing him about that throughout the trip, just like, "Dude, you got to film more of I mean, you're doing a good job at the breweries, but you're not filming a lot of the in between stuff like the hitchhiking and the travel and narrative stuff about what's going on. I'd been telling him that, and he would get upset most of the time. But I'm like, this is what you're here for, is to film the trip. So then I was telling John that, and then Nick got upset in that moment. He's just like, and he was saying something like it's hard to grab the camera on the go and charge, and then sort of John ribbed him a little bit. He's like, "What about that plug right there? Like plug in there." And I don't know. And then Nick got really upset and just like went out into the backyard. And John and I just kept talking. Nick came in for a minute, just grabbed his sleeping bag and went back outside. So I assume he was just gonna sleep in the backyard. Liz had kind of taken his spot on the couch anyway. So I'm like, all right, well, he's pissed, and oh well, I don't know what to do about that. So just kept talking with John, had another beer or something, and he took off, and then I wound down. I think I got some uploads going or something, and yeah, passed out in the office room where I was staying. And I woke up in the morning, and I noticed that Nick's bag was gone, and the equipment bag was gone. And I look over at Liz, I'm like, "Did Nick take off?" And she's like, "Yeah, I don't know where he went. Get coffee or something." And I'm like, "But his fucking bag's gone." So I look in the backyard, I don't see him there. So I started texting him, like, "Where you at?" Whatever. Not hearing from him. Um, and I had a suspicion that the dude might have just bailed. So I messaged a mutual friend of ours and found out that he was flying to Chicago. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, we still had, the release party, another brewery, besides that, the walking tour, all this stuff to film at. So finally, he starts responding to my text. He didn't pick up any of my calls, and I'm just like, where are you going? Like, what's happening? And he's just like, you shouldn't, you gotta choose your words wisely, and should have respected my feelings and this and that, because to be fair, we were laughing at him a little bit. Like, it kind of became a joke that night before. And, like I said, I criticized him several times about like just learning how to use the equipment better and just mainly just filming more of the journey. And, it didn't help that we were just kind of laughing in his face a little bit that night, but it was just like kind of ridiculous. I don't know, like his arguments were kind of silly and it was just funny in that moment, even though it's like, really do need to film here. Like that's kind of a big deal, actually. Um, so yeah, texting with him, and he's like, "Yeah, that's why I left." And I'm like, "Oh, all right, dude. I understand that your feelings are hurt, but there's like 30 odd people who supported us on the Kickstarter, and all these breweries that counted on us to put on a good show, and the three things we still have left to film, and this, they paid a graphic designer, and they're having a release party for us. It's like this is a lot more to do than just me and your feelings. Just like some professional shit. Just like wrap it up. So I'm like, all right, well, if you're gonna leave, just like let me meet up with you and get my gear so I can finish filming the show with like this equipment. You're basically just stealing like $6,000 worth of equipment from me right now and sabotaging the show. Like, just all right. I understand you're fucking hurt. Like, go, but leave me the gear. And he's like, no, I'm gonna send it to someone else. So I'm like, okay. Like basically our producer, a friend of mine who'd invested in all the gear, he's gonna send it to him. So like, this is ridiculous, man. Um, so I'm a little like, what the hell's going on? Like, I'm losing a friend here. The show is like, what am I gonna do to salvage this show? Because like, I got to make this happen. When I got people counting on me, I got to make it work. Um, so I'm just like going through my head, like, what gear do I have left? How can I film this? How's this gonna work? How am I gonna get this gear back from him eventually, Nick? Like, is this gonna become like a whole issue? So I'm just like, all right, all right. First things first, how am I gonna film this? So I go through like what the gear I have left. I got some microphones, I got some other stuff. I'm wondering what I can borrow from anybody. I'm like, all right, I think I can make this work. Nick's clearly not picking up his phone even, so like I'm not gonna be able to salvage this friendship in this moment. Um, what do I do here? Um, and luckily was not filming that day. That day had off and didn't have to film at a gigantic until the day after. So I'm like, all right, I got the day to figure out what I'm gonna do here. Maybe Nick will cool down in the meantime. We can at least find out what the hell's going on with him, and eventually I hit up our mutual friend, and I'm just like, or my friend actually, Nick's never met him. The guy he's gonna send the gear to, and he's just like, Nick says he wants to send the gear to me, but I don't need it, want it, and I'm like, yeah, I know, like, I don't know why Nick's doing this, and he felt awkward about it, and as he should, he's like, he didn't want to get in the middle of this little ordeal, and like, you could please just tell him to send it to my brother or something, like. He's not going to listen to me. He's just stubborn. So luckily he did that, and Nick texted me and gave me a tracking number, and actually was going to ship it to my brother, whose place I needed to be to for my brother is retiring from the Marine Corps, which I'll get into later, because that's what I just went through. So I'm like, all right, he's shipping there at least, but I still got to figure all this what I'm going to do for the rest of the season. So the next day, luckily, my friend, she came, and I managed to film the whole talk and walk and taste and B-roll without skipping a beat. Really, didn't have the nice camera, but I managed to. I did have enough microphones, so the sound quality was just as good, identical basically, and yeah, basically make it so the whole flow of the episode was the same. The video quality is obviously going to be a step down, but I don't think everyone's going to notice. I think it should be fine, because the tasting still had 2 out of 3 cameras that were used for every episode. It's basically just a main camera used for the tour and the primary angle for the tastings. So, but luckily I had that friend to do the walk around thing with me, so it all turned out great. And I was happy with how that turned out. And then the next day was the big what ended up being 28 breweries in a day walking. And that was such a chaotic day that I think Nick probably would have bowed out at some point during that day, anyways. And it was such a hectic kind of day of just like walking all these different breweries that it wasn't going to be the normal kind of episode, anyways. So with the GoPro and the other cameras that I had, I filmed that pretty good. So I think that's going to turn out really well, anyways. And no one's going to notice that the nice camera was missing on that. I think just actually having the GoPro and all this stuff to sort of lent itself to the style of what it was, which was just walking around just like crazy, just going into 28 breweries and having a drink of beer at each one. So that actually probably worked out for the best. Managed to get some drone footage walking over the bridges in Portland. Super fun day. Really cool. I think we started at like 11 in the morning or something, and just tore through town, hitting all these spots. Really cool. And then the next day, without taking a break, was the final day, and that was Pono Brewing, and that's the brewery that had already canned a beer for us. So I went in there with John, and we labeled the beer, which was just so cool. Like to have a beer labeled for the show, with all the hopping stuff on it, and yeah, so that was cool. Just drinking beer, throwing beers on the labeler machine, and building up the pallets and doing all that. And then John helped me film like the traditional walk and talk and taste and B-roll. Oh, except for the B-roll, we got to get that later. So did that whole thing. Managed to get an episode out of that, which was cool. The owner there, Larry, was super cool. Great beers, good attitude, and had to go directly from there to this venue where the release party was, and like the big Oregon beer blogs had written about it. So a bunch of beer nerds and podcasters and bloggers and all this stuff, all these people showed up, which was cool just to chat with them and have our beer on tap and just drink on it. And I was able to film some of that. And that was kind of the finale as far as the show is concerned. So yeah, it was just nonstop, just go, 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 film. And I met a cool guy with a beer podcast over there, and he gave me a ride back to Stephanie's, and hung out there, drinking beers for the rest of the night, and then without even any kind of break whatsoever. So my brother, this was July 3rd, that all that, I just, that day was July 3rd. My brother's retirement was July 9th on the North Carolina coast, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to hitchhike or anything that quickly. So I managed to, the cheapest flight I could find was on July 4th. It was like $80 or something like that. Um, So I would have liked to stay in Portland for the 4th of July and had been able to like sleep in and chill that night after all that drinking and everything, and just a celebration of the whole season being done and the stress and drama of Nick just bailing on me. I still haven't gotten a text back from this guy ever since he sent me the tracking number for the gear. It's just haven't heard back from him. Just trying to make amends or see what's up or see if I could send him some beer or anything. Just see what the deal is. Like, uh, I don't know. I don't know how that's all gonna turn out. But luckily, when I did get to my brother's, so I'll get into all that after this. But uh, yeah, he did send the gear back, and he did send the hard drive with all the stuff that was recorded to our editor. So as far as the show is concerned, the footage is safe. I managed to salvage, despite the sabotage, the last few episodes, and he sent most of the gear back. Not there's a couple little things that he hasn't sent back, but like I said, he's not replying to my messages at the moment, so we'll see. But that is the hopping show. So kind of like a weird ending, but an amazing trip altogether. Fantastic beer, and I think it's gonna work out with all the footage that we got, and might do a little narration. Might actually use this podcast as part of the narration. Is one thing we discussed. Me and Gary. We're gonna make it work, and it's gonna turn out fucking amazing. I'm sure of it. So I'm really excited. Like I said, weird ending. On a personal level, I hope stuff with Nick and I gets cleared up. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk things through and have a beer once again. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. So that is the hopping adventure. I'll go into the outro here and I'll tell you what's happened in the week since then and what might be next. But good times all around. Alrighty. So yeah, that was the hopping adventure, backpacking beer adventure. So as I said, I caught that flight to Raleigh. That was the cheapest way to get across the country. Still a few hours, 2-3 hours from where my brother was actually at, but that was like kind of the closest, cheapest airport I could get to. And I got there on the 4th, and his retirement wasn't until the 9th, and I knew there was going to be a lot of people staying there, so I wasn't rushing to get there just because I didn't want to be in the way. So I spent a few nights in Raleigh, just camping, hanging out, spending a lot of time at Panera Bread, uploading footage from the show. From my end, I had a couple phones using for his B&C cameras, drone footage, GoPro footage, all the stuff. Just had to upload to the editor, so I was basically just doing that at Panera Bread in Raleigh, drinking a beer here and there. And finally, on the 7th or something, I was like, all right, there's a big tropical storm coming in. Let me hitchhike before that storm comes and just be at my brother's and be chill. So did that. I hitched one ride. This really awesome guy telling me these stories about fishing around the world in remote spots and all this cool stuff. This dude, and he was going to Wilmington to pick up one of his daughter's friends. Then he was going to be going right through Sneed's Ferry, where my brother lives. So it was a perfect ride. And then he actually even bought one of my bivy packs sitting in the car. He passed me an iPad and a credit card and said, order me one of those bivy packs you were telling me about. So I'm like, hell yeah. So sold a bivy pack and got a ride. That's pretty good. And yeah, caught up with my brother. And it was actually the first time in almost a decade that me and all my siblings were in the same room. And I think it's the first time in my life that me and all my siblings were in the same room. I had divorced parents. I was 2, so I've got siblings on both sides, so that just had never been a thing. It was cool to have everyone in one spot. My brother did 20 years in the Marine Corps. He was literally in boot camp on 9/11 when those towers got knocked down, and now he's done. On to the next chapter of his life, his wife included. They met pre-boot camp, ended up rekindling that relationship and getting married, and kind of cool they got to retire together. So I got to see some of his friends, meet some of his friends, and yeah, all the family, and just had a good time. And at that point, my buddy Christian, some of you may know from Mississippi, buddy in Biloxi, um, he's been traveling out of his RV lately, and he said he could come scoop me up over there And initially I thought like, oh, okay, he's gonna scoop me up and we're gonna go blast off. I guess him and his girlfriend and maybe his kids will blast off into the country and do some cool stuff. But he's actually staying with his girlfriend in that spot in Virginia that I had mentioned that I had stopped on the way up to New York with him at. So he was just gonna pick me up and come right back here, which is where what happened and where I am. So I tried. It was a 5-hour one-way trip for him to come pick me up. So I hitchhiked 2 hours, basically saving him 4 hours of driving. Oh, crazy ride! The last ride I got that got me to I-95, where Christian eventually picked me up. So I'm standing where the on ramp meets the highway, and this guy goes to pull over to give me a ride, but he doesn't see someone getting on the on ramp and totally bashes him. And they go into a ditch, and it was some EMS woman in an SUV. Both of them were totally fine. Her car needed to get towed. So I ended up standing there on the side of the road with this guy and her over there for like an hour as like more EMS people came in, just her buddies, checking stuff out, tow truck, state trooper. I was like, man, this is nuts. And this dude did not seem to care. I mean, he cared a little bit. Mostly, he was just like, within a seconds, he's just like, oh, so where have you been traveling to? And like, tell me your story. And he's just, just as if we were already in the car rolling, like nothing happened. I was like, oh man, well, this, that, and the other. Been on the road for 14 years, blah, blah, blah. The whole spiel. Like, crazy. So, anyways, yeah, he gave me a ride, met up with Christian, and his girlfriend there, met her daughter, and Christian's kids are with him. We drove on up to her parents' spot in Virginia. That's where we are now. It's just a couple nights ago I got here, spent the day today. And yeah, just hanging out, trying to see what's next. I got word from a friend in California about maybe coming out there, so I'm pretty sure that's what I'm gonna do. Pretty sure. So, but just figuring out how I'm gonna get there, how quickly, and yeah. Once that's actually happening, I'll let you know. But could be a good way to catch up with a friend, cash up a little bit, doing the old marijuana thing, I think. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, as that starts progressing, I'll let you know. But that was the hopping adventure, the drama, the beer, all the good stuff. Where I'm at now, life is good. Oh, one more thing, hobolifestyle.com. I'm getting back into the writing and whatnot. So I did one gigantic post to totally catch myself up to present, more or less. It covers everything that I've done from the start of 2017 to just before this whole hopping trip. So I'm going to write a post just on the whole hopping trip, which you don't really need to read. You just heard the whole story here. But yeah, I'm going to get back into blogging and writing more frequently like I used to, so I can write about stuff while it's fresh in my head, which I also get to do on the podcast. So you don't necessarily need to read it. You can just listen to it here, as you always do. Freestyle Travel Show. All right, you guys, much love, and I will see you down the road.
To hell with plans I made, I need a new escape. With all my shit straight, I'll get my big